It's March 2006. Every Time We Touch by Cascada is the biggest song in the world. Comedy Central is running around the clock jokes about George W. Bush. And while you haven't seen it yet, the Pink Panther movie with Steve Martin and Beyonce still seems like a pretty good idea. YouTube is in its infancy. Staples like Chocolate Rain still won't be uploaded for at least another year. World of Warcraft has taken on a life of its own.
Abdul, can you give me a number crunch real quick?
Yeah, give me a sec. I'm coming up with 32.33, repeating of course, percentage of survival.
Oh, that's a lot better than we usually do.
It's got 7.7 million accounts active worldwide, and real communities have started to form in this virtual space. Around this time, a well-known and active player using the screen name Fajin suffered a stroke and passed away in real life. Members of her guild were gut-punched by the loss of somebody they had spent so much time with and had built such a close friendship with. Even though most of these players would never ever end up meeting each other in real life, you spend 6 hours a day playing together and talking with somebody over your headset, it's only natural that you'll end up forming real connections and relationships with these people. With the cost of travel and lodging making it unfeasible for most guild members to travel to say goodbye to Fajin in real life, her fellow server members came up with the idea to host a virtual memorial service in World of Warcraft. This wasn't the first of its kind. The practice of holding events like funerals, birthdays, and even weddings in virtual spaces had been done before, especially in those weirdo places like Second Life, but the events that followed would make this particular service an outlier and gain international media attention. Around 5:30 on March 4th, 2006, members of the server gathered at Frostfire Hot Springs in Winter Spring. While the Hot Springs was a PvP zone, meaning anybody could attack anybody, opposing faction members could run up and freely attack anyone there, the location was beautiful and serene and a perfect space on the server map to set as a backdrop for this peaceful and emotional display. Close online friends of Fajin video captured the service with the intent to send it to her real-life friends and family and show them just how cherished she was by her online World of Warcraft family. Mourners walked to the hot springs in a single file queue, their avatars dressed in formal attire rather than armor, and arranged in a crescent moon formation around a glowing depiction of Fajin's avatar. Minutes later, a group of Alliance players led by members of the guilds Serenity Now and Gnomeland Security charged through the snow-clad forest down to the shores of the small lake and killed everybody. The incident was also captured on video by the attacking guild. Soon after, the two perspectives were spliced together and uploaded to YouTube with musical backdrops and screens from World of Warcraft message board debates on the event included in the video for context. The funeral rate escaped the chronically online echoes of the WoW community and was covered by publications like Newsweek, The Guardian, and Howard Stern, who all pondered and debated whether the event was an act of true cruelty toward people just processing and mourning the loss of a real loved one, or just kind of a play stupid games, win stupid prizes, much ado about nothing case of pretend people pretending to kill other pretend people in a game where that's literally what you're supposed to do. I remember seeing the video for the first time amid all the dialogue about the attack and fully identifying with both factions. As a 13-year-old, team killing and driving the wrong direction in racing games and rickrolling people were like the funniest, edgiest pastimes that I could take up online that my parents could never yell at me for, and I really wouldn't have any consequences for. But at the same time, I think I had more close friends on Xbox Live than I did in real life. So if something happened to them, I wouldn't really be able to express this grief to anybody in real life. After all, these were just strangers using online avatars. Watching the video for the first time, I remember the clever cuts between scenes of the mourners gathering in an orderly arrangement set to this solemn orchestral choral arrangement. And then cutting to clips of the attacking guild set to this punk rock song that centered itself around this hook that was like, the self-awareness was almost there. They knew they were the bad guys, but zoom out a little bit, and this was an easy case of nerds bullying other nerds for the crime of being nerds. By the time both narratives convened and the attacking war party arrived at the funeral service, the music switched to a song I'd never heard before.
I'm a Scatman.
The man's voice spouting total gibberish to a hard-hitting Euro techno track. This was the most nonsensical song I had ever heard. It made Crazy Frog look conceptual, and the Ding Dong song by Gunther sound restrained by contrast.
Oh, you touch my tra-la-la.
As the clip showed of the internet bullies wearing full armor slaughtering morning nerds in virtual orc tuxedos, this felt like the perfect soundtrack. After all, this whole thing is just nonsense, right? Well, nearly 15 years later, I had totally forgotten about this slice of skibidi-babu techno cheese. And my best friend Joe sent me a music video out of the blue saying, "You have to watch this. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen," or something like that. And holy shit, he was right.
Scatman's World.
The song was called Scatman's World. In this song, a bald mustached man in a suit and a fedora scatted gibberish lyrics while pleading to the listener to break free and come and join him in Scatman's World, Scatland. During the verses, he neither sang nor scatted, but instead did this thing where he kind of broke the fourth wall and just talked at the listener really hard about self-acceptance and with all the seriousness and desperation of a stern parent warning you about the dangers of playing in traffic.
Scatman, fat man, black and white and brown man, tell me about the color of your soul.
As comical and zany and bonkers as this song was, there was clearly more to this guy. He either didn't realize how silly the contrast of sounded, layered with lyrics begging the listener to realize they are fine the way they are and enjoy their truth before it's too late, or he just didn't care. And I dug in a little further and I learned that it was 100% the latter. He just didn't care. John the Scatman Larkin was born in El Monte, California, March 13th, 1942. 64 years and a week to the day before the Serenity Now funeral raid. As soon as he learned to speak, it was apparent that he had a developmental disfluency, a stutter that was so bad that he struggled to complete sentences. While the stutter caused difficulties in his early childhood development, it would make middle school a total nightmare. He was bullied relentlessly, both physically and verbally. By the time John was 14 years old, he had become an impressive jazz pianist. "Playing piano gave me a way to speak," John said in a 1996 interview. "I hid behind the piano because I was scared of talking." 14 was also the year when John realized that drinking alcohol would not only take the edge off of the gut-wrenching social anxiety he felt, but it also smoothed his stutter out as well. By the time John hit 18, he was drinking around the clock and being booked regularly at nearly every jazz club in Southern California. As he ventured further onto his dream life and the nightlife of a career jazz pianist, John was introduced to hard drugs like cocaine and heroin. While John admired and completely idolized jazz singers like Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald, his debilitating stutter kept him from venturing near the club microphone and pursuing his dream of being a jazz singer. He later lamented in an interview, "I wanted so much to be somebody. I had such great feelings of inferiority." John would spend the next 15 years touring the Southern California jazz club circuit, drinking and consuming drugs all along the way. At age 42, John released his first album with friend and fellow jazz musician John Farrell. While the album never really managed to break out of the tight-woven 1980s Southern Cali jazz circle, the album was praised by peers and critics alike. It's made its way online in the past decade, and honestly, it's pretty damn good. It sounds a lot like the Andre 3000 Flute album to me as a non-jazz listener, so if you're a fan of that at all, definitely worth looking at, which is kind of wild because it came out in 1984. 2 years after its release, while promoting the album, John's collaborator on the project, Joe Farrell, died of a rare blood disorder, prompting John to seek treatment for his chemical dependency. Shortly after, John met his wife, Judy, who encouraged him to add singing into his club act. As an improvisational musician, John learned to embrace his stutter by turning it into scat singing when it would interrupt him. This set him apart in the jazz circuit, as his scat routines were less of an ad-lib afterthought as they were in most performances, but became the highlight of his show. He could scat sing faster and more unpredictably than his peers due to his stutter, which audiences quickly took to. In 1990, John and his wife moved to Germany to further his career as a musician and began playing on European cruise ships. Shortly after arriving in Europe, John was approached by a producer who had the idea to combine John's scat-centric routine over the techno club music that had grown popular among young people across Europe. John was reluctant, but he gave it a shot, and the result was fucking insane. Their first single, Scatman, reached #1 in nearly every country it was released. Not in the jazz charts or the adult contemporary charts either. This was a 50-year-old man who had the #1 song in 10 different countries' pop or dance charts with his very first single. While the hook of the song was little more than John saying nonsense syllables and boldly declaring, "I'm the Scatman," like some kind of free jazz Braveheart, the verses to the song took a way different approach. John used this 15 seconds of fame to try to speak directly to people struggling with developmental influency and stuttering. Everybody stutters one way or the other, so check out my message to you. As a matter of fact, don't let nothing hold you back. If the Scatman can do it, so can you. If you turned on MTV in 1993, chances are you'd see Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, you'd see Aerosmith, and then, for some reason, you'd see a 50-year-old man with only one song out. The #1 song in the world was somehow an EDM jazz fusion song about stuttering. John followed this single with the album Scatman's World. John could have easily just phoned it in and coasted off the success of his first single. Instead, he released a full concept album about a planet called Scatman's World, or Scatland. The album described, in extreme detail, a utopian society void of money or prejudice where everyone simply loved one another and did what they enjoyed most while making sure those less abled had total equity. The album was a crazy shot in the dark and somehow was a huge commercial success. Scatman's World sold over 1.5 million copies in Japan alone. In 1998, 3 years after the release of Scatman's World, John was diagnosed with lung cancer. He'd spent more than 40 years of his life living in fear and addiction. The tragic unfairness is that at age 57, his life had truly just begun. But through his total surrender to his stutter and surrender to a musical culture he really had no experience with or any desire to really partake in, he was able to live more in the last 8 years than a lot of us really will in our whole lives. He played sold-out arenas all across the world. He took his beloved wife Judy to countries they'd only really read about, experiencing everything life had to offer, all while holding true to his commitment to use every breath in the spotlight to speak to those he felt like needed to hear it, to keep another generation of kids with stutter from living in the shadows. Near the end of his life, John told his friend Gina, "Whatever God wants is fine by me. I've had the very best life. I've tasted beauty." John passed away the following year. Sometimes life has a really cruel way of reminding us that this is all just nonsense. There's no real set order to any of this. Sometimes the bad guys win, and they ruin your memorial service just to kind of be jerks. Sometimes the kindest, most gentle people get the worst cards handed to them at the most unfair times. Sometimes one of the greatest living rappers wakes up and realizes that writing 16s does nothing for him, but making a flute jazz album makes him feel inspired again. I think the story of Scatman John feels so topical because it perfectly describes all the ways to surrender. You can surrender when you're getting made fun of for talking and just go quiet. You can surrender when drugs and alcohol aren't working and decide to go sober and raw dog life again. Then you can surrender when, say, quiet doesn't work for you and you're gonna sing scat jazz. Then your producer tells you that techno records are selling, so you surrender to this new musical wave. Then you find out you've gone platinum 22 times and you surrender to the fact that against all odds, at 50 years old, you are a celebrity now and your fan base is all young people. Then you get handed this diagnosis as unfair as cancer and this life that you've waited your whole life to live. This friend that you've waited your whole life to find, you don't get any more time with them. And like stuttering, you surrender to that fact that you can't change it. If you can learn to accept this nasty circumstance, you can spend the last year of your life tasting every apple like it's your first. Hear every song like it was written for you. You can spend every moment, every meal, every date night with your wife like it's your absolute last. Because maybe it is. And if it is, doesn't that make you love it a little more? You can look at something like a World of Warcraft funeral just like most people look at Scatman's world and think this is stupid. Because it is. At the end of the day, this is all pretend. Nobody's really getting killed when a rival faction into a fake funeral. But at a certain point, what more do we have? Nothing is sacred unless you make it sacred. Scatting skibbity toilet or whatever seems like the stupidest, most meaningless thing someone could do on a record. But if you can use that vessel to try to do some good in the world, what difference does it make if you're not Bob Dylan level songwriting for a change? Sometimes all we have is nonsense. If all you have to process grief of an internet friend or help their family process grief is World of Warcraft, shouldn't you at least try to do something? Even if it seems stupid to everyone else, it's worth a shot. Sometimes all we have is nonsense and the intention to do good. Despite the unfairness of the world and the unfortunate truth that a lot of people just won't get it, that really is enough. Goofiness and good intentions, or benevolent nonsense. Sometimes, no matter how much you wish you could change things, you just can't. And all you can do is say,
I'm a Scatman.
hey, thank you so much for watching. This was a little rough around the edges, I know. It's my very first venture into the world of video production and video essays, so I appreciate you sticking with me and sticking all the way through it. All the music in this video is provided by my good friend Katana Boy from his new album Replenishing Touch. I'd also like to thank my friend Dane for motivating me to make this video. His new video Bald YouTuber tier list is available now. Links to both of those projects are available in the description below, as well as links to all the sources that I used in this video. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and subscribe, or whatever the hell YouTubers say. Thank you.